What is design thinking? More importantly, how does it fit into compliance? Join two fans of design thinking for the compliance profession, Tom Fox, the compliance evangelist, and Carsten Tams, ethical business architect and founder of Emagence LLC, as they explore how the compliance profession can use design thinking to more fully operationalize a compliance program.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to the latest edition of the Compliance Podcast Network, Design Thinking and Compliance. In this initial episode, Carsten Tams, my co-host, and myself take up the question of what is design thinking. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'm extraordinarily thrilled to bring you the premiere episode of Design Thinking and Compliance. In the series, I'm going to be joined by my co-host, Carsten Tams. Carsten, I am so excited to be doing this podcast series with you. Perhaps we could start off by you telling us what you're up to now, and more importantly, what got you so interested in design thinking?
All right. Yes. Hi, Tom, and it's wonderful to be here with you to discuss this topic. It's a true honor to be part of this podcast. My name is Carsten Tams, and I'm an independent consultant with Emagence, a consulting boutique I've founded in the ethics and compliance space. My primary concern always has been not just how we create adequate ethics and compliance program, but also how we create adequate engagement of employees in these programs. So in my work, I look at proven concepts from other fields that help create user engagement. So that includes design thinking, human-centered design, co-creation, nudging, science of motivation, a few other things. And I carry those over, I apply those to the field of ethics and compliance to find new avenues to create deeper, more positive employee engagement in the various things we do as ethics and compliance professionals.
So, Carsten, I got interested in design thinking a few years back. I took a course from Columbia University. I wrote about it. But you had a very interesting series on LinkedIn over the summer that got me sort of re-energized about compliance thinking. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what led you to write your LinkedIn series, and what is it about design thinking that you think or you feel answers a question or a problem in the compliance space?
Yeah, I was very excited when I came across your piece on design thinking and compliance. But sometimes you ponder some ideas and you think, wow, this could be really relevant for us, and you think, wow, but maybe it's just me, maybe I'm crazy. So when I saw your piece, I thought, well, maybe there's definitely more to it. As I said, for me the big question was always, how to create positive engagement. That has a little bit to do with my prior history. Also, I spent a lot of many years in human resources and building corporate cultures that are highly engaging to employees, that motivate them, that excite them to do their best to actualize their full human potential at work. And so I brought that with me to my role as head of ethics and compliance in a large multinational media company some years ago. And so that was always the focus of my attention. And then I encountered design thinking, and I realized that's really a core focus of design thinking. How do we create solutions that positively resonate with users, that engage them, that they adopt, and many companies, some of the most successful companies in the world, are applying design thinking commercially to produce better services, to produce more successful products. I realized, some of the key principles and the processes that design thinking provides could really help us in the ethics and compliance space to engender this similar effect, to get employees to to really see value in the things we do, in the codes of conducts we create, in the trainings we design, in the reporting systems we put at their disposal, and to make active use of these things.
Carsten, the thing that excited me about design thinking when I first came across it was the sense of engagement. The engagement that a company would have. It started off with its customers and how to design a product or service that was customer oriented. I saw the same applicability to compliance, but frankly, you took it a step further. And your first article you posted, you had me literally from the first title, which was Effectiveness Equaled Engagement. How do you see design thinking as facilitating not simply engagement, but that next level of effectiveness?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think we've come a long way in ethics and compliance. Many companies have developed comprehensive programs as defined by regulations and by leading industry practice. So we have established adequate procedures. But one thing that I see lacking, or I think where many of us still face an uphill battle, is generating adequate engagement. Right? What can we do for employees to pay attention and make positive use of the programs that we provide to them? Will employees consult the ethics codes when they have questions? Do they see training as something that is informative, that's valuable and applicable to their work? When they have questions or observe problematic behavior, will they turn to the speak up mechanisms? Will they pick up the phone and call the ethics and compliance function? So so when I speak about the need for employee engagement, that's really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really affecting behavior, creating this behavior chain that ultimately I think our programs are meant to produce. And in my view, so that's where I say engagement equals effectiveness. Unless people use these tools that we provide to them, that the tools are not effective. They are merely paper programs, and that provides us with a certain, maybe legal cover, if you will. If something goes wrong, we can show, yes, we have a code, yes, we have training, yes, we have speak-up mechanisms, etc. But have we truly affected employees' behavior? Have we really expanded their opportunities to participate in a positive way in our efforts to maintain companies' ethical values? Well, we haven't, and it's very hard to come by data on employee engagement and ethics programs. To the extent that I have found some data, it is somewhat dated. I feel like it has gone away, but and I'm wondering, why is there not a greater interest in this very important critical question? How engaged are employees? How much use do they make of the systems? But we know, for example, from studies such as from Gartner and also ECI surveys that about employees and their use of ethics and compliance programs, we know that about half of employees report the misconduct they observe, but merely 3 to 5% actually turn to the ethics and compliance function to do so. There was also a study by the corporate executive board that found that 2/3 of employees view compliance training as unsatisfying and irrelevant. So that doesn't bode well for employee engagement. SCCE did an interesting survey of compliance officers a few years back, which found that, again, about close to 2/3 of compliance professionals feel that their relationship with colleagues is strained, is adversarial. Which present us with an interesting dichotomy. I think many ethics and compliance professionals, we see extraordinary value in our work. I mean, what could be in a way more noble than to help advance companies' ethical performance? But that positive connection with employees, that piece of trust, of engagement, I think that's the challenge. And I think design thinking has answers to help us overcome that challenge.
Carsten, there's a perhaps deeper issue I might want to explore with you for a few moments. I think every listener to one of my podcasts knows I'm a proud citizen of the great state of Texas. And as they have listened to you in this podcast and in other events, they probably realize you are not from the great state of Texas, and indeed from Europe. But I want to use that as a way to introduce the following topic. When I initially came into the compliance field, there was a dichotomy in the approach to compliance training and communication between the United States and Europe. Most generally, it was the United States tended to be rules-based with policies and procedures. And Europe tended to be values-based with communicating the values of an organization and then not having a large number of rules. If you find that dichotomy valid, is that something that, because of your professional background and your academic background, you brought to this discussion where communicating values is more important than simply laying down the rules? And is that one of the reasons you found design thinking perhaps a useful tool for the compliance professional, because it allowed a broader discussion of values and the reinforcement of values through this engagement that we see with design thinking?
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle, and I think there might be a lot to it, although I have to say I've now lived in New York longer than in any other place in my life, over 20 years, and my focus has been very, very North American centered, of course, always with an eye to Europe as well, and to Germany in particular, where I was born. So my sense is that, we've also had a phase in Europe or globally where the focus has been on regulatory compliance. But there has been an interest, as you say, also on values. I think the interesting challenge that I see is not so much kind of the continental divide or the Atlantic divide between Europe and North America. I think the challenge for me that is really, or the opportunity that is really intriguing, is to bridge the divide between, let's say, the compliance as it has emerged out of, very regulatory forward, legal focus, post Enron, post WorldCom, largely driven by, attorneys, of course, which makes historically a lot of sense. So that on one side, and on the other side, this wealth of ideas and of research coming from academia, coming from various interdisciplinary fields, be it sociology, be it psychology, be it behavioral economics and what have you, and bring more of these insights over into the ethics and compliance field, to think more deeply, not just about, okay, what are the regulatory requirements that we have to comply with, but also, how can we really truly get through to human behavior and people's attitudes, feelings, emotions, so that all these regulatory things that we do and should do really have their full impact. And I think that's go ahead.
One of the earliest precursors to these concepts to me was the following. Siemens had a very large Foreign Corrupt Practices Act enforcement action in 2008. And Siemens' CEO thereafter really worked to communicate to the employees that this was not to happen again. But the thing that struck me was in the town halls that he held with Siemens employees, they were very upset about the fact that the company had violated what they believed a core value, which was we will not do business through bribery and corruption, and that employees really wanted those core values brought to the fore in their compliance program. And what Siemens did was not called design thinking, but it incorporated many of the concepts you've just talked about, starting with employee engagement, and that they were able to build on that employee sentiment that they wanted to work for an ethical company. And that was a core value, and that they were able to use that. Is that the type of engagement that design thinking is designed to harness and capture moving forward to many of the regulatory requirements that we now have in place around policies and procedures, training, et cetera? Is that sort of the kind of thing that you could potentially tap into through design thinking, and even with your statement of effectiveness equals engagement?
No, yeah, excellent point. So I think that really puts the finger on one of the great opportunities that design thinking offers us in kind of envisioning ethics and compliance, re-envisioning the role of employees in that process, and putting values really at the center. And let me quickly elaborate on that. One of the key principles that defines design thinking is human-centered design. And the idea of human-centered design at its basis is that if we want to create solutions, ethics and compliance solutions, trainings, codes, etc., that resonate with employees, then we really have to focus on the user. We have to understand who the users are, and what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and what their capabilities are. In my view, one of the and then here's a really great opportunity for us, because historically, conventionally, I think in our practice, due to its history, having being driven from a legal perspective, and following on the heels of being motivated by responding to these big corporate scandals, WorldCom, Enron, and what have you. The focus has been to view employees as through a deficit lens, if you want to call it that. To see them as risk factors, as potential delinquents, and and that translated into strategies that were focused on kind of constraining that risk of malfeasance, of deviance. We wrote codes that specified verboten behaviors. We instructed employees on the things they were not supposed to do. We monitored and we responded to deviance with disciplinary sanctions. So that, in a nutshell, that was the strategic core of the early phase. However, if we look at employees very closely, we discover that, yes, of course, there is that, we are all human, we are all fallible. There is this risk of ethical lapses. But at the same time, there is also something that the eminent psychologist Albert Bandura, who sadly recently passed away, but what he called human moral agency, and specifically promotive moral agency. And what this is that every human being, more or less, has a positive capacity to participate in shaping the world. That's what he calls human agency. We all have a desire to participate in shaping the circumstances of our lives, of our social lives, and moral human agency then applies to this ethical aspect. We also want to participate in shaping and upholding the social norms, the ethical values that are relevant in the social groups, the communities that we are part of, including our work lives. That means people have a capacity, to participate actively, proactively in shaping norms. They come with values to work, and we see that now. If we look at the workplaces, we see often that employees challenge their management to be more ethical, right? Think of some walkouts. Think of whistleblowers. Anti-fraud studies show us that the primary source for fraud detection are employees, who reveal misconduct. So when we expand our understanding of human capability in this ethical space, this opens up the space for other complementary strategies. So now it's not just about constraining people's potential for malfeasance. The focus shifts somewhat towards, how can we support employees? What can we provide? What resources, tools, information, skills can we make available to our colleagues to support them in fully actualizing their potential to participate in this shared responsibility of governance, in the shared responsibility of upholding the ethical values of the company. And once we shift the language and the strategy into that direction, we will find that employees have a much better view of ethics and compliance. They are much more likely to engage with the code, the training, and what have you. And there are some interesting studies to support that argument. But I hope that makes sense too. Mm-hmm.
It does. Unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for our inaugural episode, but I hope our listeners will join us for our next episode where we take a little bit deeper dive into what is design thinking and what is human-centered design. Carsten and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Tom.
This is Tom Fox. Thank you for listening to this first episode of Design Thinking and Compliance. I hope you will join Carsten and I again for our next episode. Carsten and I have both written on design thinking and compliance, and we're going to link to those articles in the show notes. Please check them out for additional resources. I have two other podcasts to tell you about. The first one is Effing Argentina, a little bit different direction for the Compliance Podcast Network, where I visit with Greg Greenberg, the author of Effing Argentina, which are 11 tales of exasperation in the modern life. If you want a humorous look at exasperation, this is the podcast for you. Also, A Yank at Oxford, where with my co-host David Simon, we detail his journey to Oxford to get an MBA while David is practicing law and in his mid-50s. It's going to be a fascinating series. That podcast has had its first episode drop, and it will appear quarterly as David checks in to tell us about his experiences in getting an MBA at Oxford. Design Thinking and Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.